wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we are talking about emotions, and specifically the purpose of emotions, because I don't know about you, Jules, but I have had an emotional roller coaster of a week, and so it's really got me quite reflective and introspective around what my buttons are, what it means, and also just more broadly what's going on kind of in the world at the moment. Globally, yeah, around emotion. And I know you've had a similar kind of a week with
definitely. Maybe it's just the week for it. But I really loved, you and I caught up at a play centre with our little toddlers the other day. And I loved that we were both sharing these stories and that you had this amazing insight into, it's so interesting how emotions run our lives. And I thought, that's amazing. Let's, pull that apart. So do you kind of remember what that was? Can you reflect a little bit on what that sentence even meant, that our emotions run our lives?
Yeah, and I think because I was really caught up in a lot of stuff, actually. I needed to download, so it was perfect. Yeah. But that concept, I guess, of emotions running our lives that's what it means to be human, is to swing from one emotion to another, really. But it's ultimately when we can be more poised and present, is when we kind of our most authentic self. We're less consumed by the emotions that are driving us, and we can have more clarity about our decision making, more clarity about what's for us and what's not for us.
So when you say that, are you talking about where you're able to, intellectualize the emotion that you're feeling, so you're not acting out of that emotion?
Yeah, I think it's about more of being an observer. Yes. So when you feel when you're feeling your blood pressure rise, or feeling kind of,
whatever your symptoms are.
Yeah, whatever those, because often your physiology will be reflecting this for you, whether it's anger rising up in you, whether it's, like you feel a bit flighty, or you feel like you've got butterflies, or whatever that is. It's really kind of what's going on? Where'd that come from? Why am I now feeling like this? What thought preceded this feeling that I have? To just understand it a little bit more. And I guess from my perspective, I've been doing an awful lot of learning around emotions and human behaviour and our potential. And we know, like, at the level of a soul, if we're talking spirituality, nothing's missing. So, but at the level of the senses, we perceive things are. To be human is to be emotional and to have these senses that help us navigate our way. And we never want to get rid of those, because that's what drives us. But when we can keep them, when we can use the feedback that emotions provide us to get more present and trying to understand what they're trying to tell us, then we can empower ourselves a lot more and act less out of emotion and more from a place of being poised and decisive and proactive as opposed to reactive.
And making, I'm assuming, in that more of a soul choice moving forwards as opposed to just really just acting out.
Yeah, because ultimately everyone, like, we all just want to be loved and accepted for who we are. So we are consciously and unconsciously pushing what's most important to us onto other people, expecting them to see it as important. So you've got all these people walking around thinking what they think is best, and when you've got two people
based on their value system,
and no one's value system is more right than anybody else's. It's just their value system. So
when we say value system, maybe we should just break that down. So what do you mean by value system?
So it's not like value system, not as integrity, kind of kindness. That's just kind of traits, which everyone has those traits. And those anti-traits, everybody has every trait. When I'm talking values, I mean what's most important to you. So what your life demonstrates is most important to you. And that will be, how you spend your money, what you think about, what you think about, how you spend your time, what you dream about most, what you talk about most, what you find energizes you to talk to other people about.
Yeah.
That's what's most important to you. And so when you have clashes with people, quite often it's because you're either expecting that person to value what you value, or you expect yourself to live outside what you truly value and inside what that other person values most. Yeah. So you're kind of expecting yourself to step out of your authentic self. And that's kind of
which is really hard. I'm actually going to bring up the story that's, we briefly touched on tonight and I'm still feeling a little bit unsure about. my sister is a single mum, and so she needs a lot of help and time out with her kids to really function as best as she can. And for the most part, I try to do my best to help her. But as Bridget's pointed out, my top value system is really my family, which is what my life demonstrates. It's all about them. And sometimes I sat there and went, is it? I don't know. There's a whole lot more to me than them. And then tonight I had the epiphany moment where my sister had asked me to do some babysitting for her that was really going to clash and change the weekend that I had planned with my family, because my husband works full time and the weekends are pretty special for me. And I had, you know, grumbled and moaned about it in my head and then decided I would do, in commas, the right thing and help her out. So I said yes. But I was saying to Bridget, I was feeling so conflicted and upset and a bit angry about the fact that I'd done that and I didn't really want to, but I should, and, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you said the most beautiful thing. You went, yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because you've really asked yourself to step outside of your value system, being your family. And I went, oh my gosh, that's what it is.
The penny drops.
Yeah. And now I really get it. Whereas I feel like I was really struggling with that concept of what a value system or hierarchy really looked like for me.
Because it's different for everyone. And, you know, often we'll get a challenge or we'll have, you know, kind of something come up which will shake up what's most important to us, you know, and shuffle some things around. That's kind of when we can have those senses of like an identity crisis, like who am I, what am I going through, like that kind of breakdown before we have a breakthrough kind of scenario. But certainly that experience is classic. And you know, when you're getting so highly charged about something, you know, this isn't the first time, like anything that...
There's a pattern to it.
There's a pattern to it, and quite often these patterns are entrenched at a really young age, and that we keep attracting them in to get us to love them, you know, so those buttons will keep getting pushed so that we are grateful for it, you know, because that's ultimately what we're all here to become, is more whole, you know.
So break it down for me, break my story down for me. Why should I be grateful for the fact that I'm angry, that I'm giving up my time and my weekend? I'm going to be, you know, really baseline to help my sister out, which on one hand I really want to be able to do because I see how she needs it. And they are my niece and nephew and I do love them and I do want to spend time with them. Just it's the middle weekend of the school holidays. I think that, obviously you've now made the decision that this is what you're going to do. I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
so, but this is obviously a recurring pattern for me.
Yes.
So can you break that apart with me?
So for you, so it sounds to me like that you feel a sense of guilt or responsibility to look after Sandy's children because she's a single mother and she struggles with that.
Yes.
And so as long as you feel like that, then that's what you're going to continue to create. You know, if you feel like that there's drawbacks to her in that life that she has and that you have to help fill those voids that she's got, then you're going to continue to create this scenario where you're looking at where she's asking you to do this. So until you can see that there's benefits for her to find a network and build a network outside, needing you to do it.
I get it. So the voids, I get that. So I'm perceiving the voids and therefore I'm calling in the experience to continue to meet those because I have an unbalanced viewpoint of what that is. I'm not seeing any positives in her not having that support.
You're seeing her as needing it. And so by you giving her that, you're perpetuating it for her too. You're perpetuating the story for her. And ultimately, you know, you need to look at how it serves her to not rely on you. Because, you know, we often use people around us as crutches, you know, to avoid the things that are painful for us or to, to kind of resist change. And, you know, that's why, you know, there's a lot of talk around, you know, what's the most responsible way to govern attitudes to money and to not kind of give away money to people because people will keep coming back and asking for it. You know, it's that same kind of thing. You know, it's about building some, kind of
tough
boundaries a little bit. Yeah. And it's not to be cold by any stretch, but it's to see how that serves that person to grow.
And would it be like, in terms of what you're really touching on here is also universal laws in terms of looking at the duality of that.
Yeah.
So even in just my being able to link the positives to if I said no, might even shift that scenario as opposed to me even doing the saying of the no.
Yeah, that's right. So because if we're talking about, us as humans being energy and everything being energy, then with that in mind, you can influence, you transform yourself and you transform your own perception, and the world around you transforms. Because if we're all energy, then the space between you and I is not really space, it's atoms. So we are made of atoms, and there's the space between you and I is also made of atoms. So we are touching. So you're changing your own perception, and the people who you are most closest to, because of quantum entanglement, that idea that, it doesn't matter how far apart you pull something, it's still connected. How far apart you pull something, that connection is never broken. You have that energetic, kind of power to influence that relationship with those people closest to you, and in fact anybody who you actually come in contact with and have a close connection with. So you don't even sometimes need to have the confrontation around it. You can just balance your own perception of the situation and change your own, in this case.
And that's a ripple effect. The universe kind of then answers
that. It is.
It's a ripple
because nothing is wrong per se. Nothing needs fixing. It's just our perception that needs to change. To view both sides, to see that, because as soon as we judge...
So then I would be eliminating the charge around it.
You would be. Because it's a process of changing your perspective, and through doing that and through doing benefits, so because at the moment you're seeing sort of more drawbacks to this whole situation. When you can see benefits, then you start to balance out that charge. It's no longer running you.
So really it would be seeing the benefits to me in having her kids and not having her kids.
Yeah.
And also the benefits for my sister in having her kids and not having her kids.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's a kind of simplistic way, and it's hard to explain this in detail because it's quite complex. So this sort of theory, this practice is derived a lot from the ancient sort of work of Socrates, who was a Greek philosopher. And it's been repurposed by a number of people now who, in today's society, who are doing incredible things, which is far beyond the paradigm of the world that most of us live in, that the masses live in. And, talking to that point of emotions, you look at your Facebook feed, and pretty much your Facebook feed defines two things: what's most important to all your friends, and what emotions are running them. So if you look at your feed, you'll see obviously that, whatever it is, parenting is important to this person and sports important to that person. And as soon as you start to see status updates that are really kind of fired up, or, constantly around the same kind of topic, you'll realize that that's an emotional thing that's running that person. And, we all have them, but it's a great example of that mass idea of swinging from one emotion to another, from one idea of we've got to make right this world that's so wrong, or that, we've got to eat all this great food because all that other food's bad. It's failing to see that there's actually a grey there, and the grey never goes away, and there's always two sides, and nothing is ever black and white. So whenever you think something's really black, well, then where's the white? Where's the other side? Because it's that classic, there's two sides to every story. And it doesn't matter how polarized you might be about something, there is always another side. And it's particularly when you see a whole country, in this case, our whole country seems to be at odds with Tony Abbott. It's wise to go, okay, well, what's the other side here? Because there's clearly a side that the media is preferring. But what's the other side to him? What benefits does he bring? Because as long as we kind of jump on that mass view that something's bad, we're not seeing the full picture. We're not seeing the benefits that Or
even what I love out of that whole concept is that out of adversity comes the most amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, I can't even remember now. I was reading this blog or post or something, and look, it's a little bit controversial, but almost saying, without Osama bin Laden, we wouldn't have had Bush. And it's this whole concept of there's two sides to every coin, and sometimes the really deep, dark stuff is there because it creates an upsurge or an uprising or a dominance of its polar opposite.
Yeah, and I mean, to take that even further, in the actual moment that anything that we perceive as bad is happening, there's something equally and balancing that is good. So that's what we term synchronicity. So it's not even cause and effect, because cause and effect are separate in space and time. Cause effect is the two things happening synchronistically. And that idea of those two sides, that is what love is. So love is the two sides in perfect balance. And that's all the universe actually is those two sides in perfect synchronous balance. But we don't see that because we are filtering the world
through emotion
and through what's most important to us. And so it's only very, often for glimpses of time that we can see the perfection
What are the gifts in that? So in terms of a more of a larger scale humanity kind of perspective. So at a soul level, we're all designed to perceive the world through love and therefore equal balance.
Yeah.
So we are in a human world and human dynamic, human experience, and the benefits of living through emotion are what that you see.
Well, if we didn't have emotion, then we wouldn't be driving to fix the world. I mean, yes, the world doesn't need fixing, but if you took away the things that make us human, then we wouldn't be striving to evolve the way that we are. So, you'll have all these people,
there's no charge, there's no reason to be passionate about whatever it is.
Exactly. So, you'll see people, there's a real swing now towards wellness and conscious living and, a lot of, organic food. And that sort of comes from the perception that our lives are getting too toxic, or the big food industries are too powerful. So each one is always trying to balance the other one, and we are all kind of come here with our own set of values what's most important to us that we seek to fill in our lives. And so for every person who's an ecologist who thinks we need to conserve the world, you've got somebody who's a technologist who wants to push it forward. And so that's beautiful. You don't want to get rid of either one of those, because each one of those is necessary for each other's growth.
I just love that concept. I just love it.
So, I mean, and it can be challenging to get your head around.
And even generationally, like you even look at generations and you go, we came out of the repressed 50s. What came out of that? The hippies. Yeah. And then, out of that came, I just think even every generation is almost kind of doing that. This conflict between X generation and Y generation is there's even that there.
But also, further to that, it's also that things are always changing form. So there's this law of compensation, which is sort of Ralph Waldo Emerson, an American kind of philosopher, coined a lot of literature around this idea that nothing's ever missing. It's just changing form, and it's in a form that we haven't recognised yet. And so, we talked about this in one of our earlier podcasts, the village isn't gone. It's just the village. It's changed form. It's changed form. It's online. It's through these podcasts. Yes. It's...
And your fertility hasn't gone. Yeah. It's just changed form.
Well, it's back now because I've got my period. But
I know.
Yeah, so, and so I guess we limit ourselves when we don't ask ourselves, like, hey, well, where is that thing that I'm perceiving to be missing? Because it's not. It's just not in a form that we are seeing, because nature is always in complete balance. I've got a quote here from Leonardo da Vinci, because he did a lot of work, and I particularly like him because he had a kind of a real reverence for the divine feminine.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
And a really, really kind of interesting man. And he says, nature is the source of all true knowledge. She has her own logic, her own laws. She has no effect without cause, nor intervention without necessity. So that can be applied to everything. And that really talks to that idea that there is kind of a grander design for how we live. And that, when we kind of limit our view of the world by our own individual values and kind of way of life and thinking, we fail to take ourselves out and see the bigger picture. It's like that, we get those photographs sent to us from space, and Earth looks so perfect because it is perfect. When you take yourself far enough away, you see that it's perfect. But this can be really hard when we're caught up in our own emotions. So, people will say that that's terrible. How can you say that what's going on in Syria is perfect, or what's going on wherever is perfect? And that's not to take away from those people's suffering. But we know that we can't have war without peace. There's this constant suggestion that, when we do X, Y, Z, we're going to be better off. Or when we do X, Y, Z, peace will arrive. But the war and the peace is what keeps us growing. It's what keeps us evolving as a species. It's what keeps us striving to, and of course some societies will do better than others, and that's as a result of, again, universal laws around overpowerers and underpowerers. Unless you're empowered, you will be overpowered. And that's what happens with whole societies and countries and, all of that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, emotions are just fascinating. And it's funny because I'd spent a lot of time on this work and, and I know I'm doing it now, intellectualizing this work, thinking, I don't need those emotions. And my subconscious, honestly...
I'm above them.
I'm above them. I don't have time for those. And what that does is that then, you first of all, you can disconnect from people because you're unable to feel.
Well, you're disconnecting from yourself.
We are. Yeah, that's right. And you also...
And you're disowning. You're not actually then owning it, are you?
That's right. And so, because when you just talk about things always being in balance and go, oh, it's fine, it's always in balance, that means you're just indifferent to it. It means that you can then start to numb yourself or shut off, which actually, incidentally, can then attract massive wake-up calls.
Yeah.
Because that's not great. That's not gratitude. That's just kind of explaining away, which is not what the point of this is. The point of it is to ask, you know, for whatever's going around us or whatever's happening.
But to actually be able to feel into the positive and the negative. So it's not a disconnection from either side. It's just being able to actually feel and almost sit in how that feels from each side to come to a point of, it's okay.
And so, you know, what is this trying to communicate to me? Because our intuition is always working really hard to, you know, when we have a charge that's quite strong, our mind's working really hard to reveal the other side of the charge, because you can't have one without the other. Like a really strong emotional charge has another side to it. Because an atom, you know, like if we're all energy, you can't separate a coin. It's always got two sides. You can't pull apart a magnet. Even if you break a magnet, you've still got positive and negative. So even with every charge, there's the other side. And so the stronger the charge, stronger your intuition's trying to show you the other side. And so that's quite beautiful, really. Like, so it's about kind of that slowing down and really tuning into your body and feeling, like asking your body or asking your whole self what it's trying to communicate to you. You know, if you start to see a pattern around, you know, certain people or certain events or certain things that are happening to you that that create a particular response, well, you know, what's that trying to communicate to me? You know, because it's never, you know, we always want to blame other people for how we feel or what happens to us, but it's never them. I love that
concept of the holographic universe being the mirror. So the holographic universe, I think we might have touched on this earlier.
We have, yeah.
Was that whole concept of I am everything and everything is me. We're all connected and made of the same stuff, and every part that's out there is within me. So essentially, if we take this concept out, then we're having conversations with ourselves. Any advice we give is actually advice for ourselves.
Yeah.
Any conflict is actually parts of ourselves we haven't really owned or given love to yet.
Yes, yeah.
And so when you're coming across people that you just really dislike or really pushing your buttons, situations that keep arising that are hugely stressful or painful or whatever it is, there's always a bigger reason there. And so the reason is step outside of that pain and that frustration, that anger, to go, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Isn't it? So what's the picture? What's the lesson? Where do I display that? Where am I not owning that? Where could I, even if I haven't done it, so maybe, you know, you're judging horrendous murderers or I'm not sure, pedophiles.
Yeah.
You've never done that, so I can't own that part of myself.
Yeah.
But part of kind of seeing that shadow side of yourself is saying, well, even if I haven't done that / experienced it, in what circumstances could I come to that point? And I don't know, if I had to defend my family, possibly I could become a murderer.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's also about owning those parts of ourselves and seeing the world as a total reflection of our growth.
Yeah.
Or what we've got left to grow into.
Yeah, and seeing, I guess, that idea that, you know, everybody is a reflection of you and everyone's an opportunity to understand more of yourself is enormously kind of exciting, really, because, like, who am I going to meet today that's going to tell me more about myself? You know, which kind of sounds really self-indulgent, but at the same time...
And we talk about that with parenting too, don't we? That our children are our biggest mirrors.
Yes.
And literally for that way, because something that's happening internally for us is somehow in that synchronicity of the universe being reflected externally for us to look at.
Yeah.
And it's also why our kids provide us with the biggest, what we call triggers, the biggest emotional reactions, that snap or that chord that's just, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back comes quicker or faster or easier with our kids than what it does with the people around us. It's because they are so, I don't know, crystal clear in their mirroring.
Children are excellent they're incredibly intuitive, and they don't have the baggage that we have, so they're brilliant at reflecting that for us. And children, I mean, we'll do another podcast on family dynamics because it's fascinating to look at, you know, for every family that you think is dysfunctional, there is an enormous perfection in that way that family is
organized. So get that. You and I have spent so much time talking about it. I so get that. And I think I might have even said this on the other podcast, spent so much of my life in so much therapy going through my family history and my family life, and, you know, sitting in it and talking it out and doing all of the plethora of tools that there are. Like, let me tell you, if it's out there, I've done it with my family. And to come to the point of realising, actually, at this point in my life, understanding now, and particularly having had Bridget in my life, understanding so much more about the universe and the laws and the positive and the negative and who I've become out of those experiences means kind of in a grand design, I had to, on a soul level, have those experiences to have the pendulum swing and come uprising out of that with characteristics or traits or experiences or knowledge that had I not had that really dark, deep stuff wouldn't have come, I wouldn't have the toolkit to do.
Yeah.
And that totally is part of what makes me me now. So I look at my mum and my family life that I used to, you know, need to be in therapy for, and now I go, my gosh, I'm actually so grateful.
Yeah.
Of course I needed to have that mother. And of course I needed to have that family dynamic because here's what I got out of that.
And how much has that driven you to create the life you have now and to create the connection with your children that you have now?
Oh, totally. And the business I've chosen and the communities that I create, that's all out of the toolkit that came from my childhood.
Yeah, which is beautiful. I mean, this is a place that some people never get to in their life. To be able to look back and rather than want to change all those things, to actually go, okay, I can see how that served me. Yes. You know, and I mean, it's very difficult to also, because ultimately we're still making value judgments, because any time we make a value judgment, we're kind of wrong, because we're still kind of saying, you know, shadow side, shadow, implying that it was darkness. Well, nothing's good or bad, it's just a judgment.
Sure.
You know, it only becomes good or bad based on how we judge it.
The meaning that we give to it.
The meaning that we give to it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, every human has every trait, it's just expressed in different ways. So, you know,
and also we could all have the same experience and give it different meaning.
Yeah, based on our own belief systems, our own experiences, all of that stuff. So, yeah, but I mean, that's the greatest gift, to look back and see that you wouldn't change anything.
Isn't it?
But there's still, I mean, and the thing is, there's never not any work to do, because if we had no work to do, we wouldn't be here.
No, that's right.
You know, our
journey over.
Yeah, that's it. You know, our purpose here is to grow.
But to grow through emotion. So you can only have the triggers to be able to have the mirror to pull them apart, to be able to see the healing and the bliss out of that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually kind of perfect, even though it's kind of shit in the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't get rid of them because you need them and they're beautiful. But you also want to not have them completely run you. So it's about kind of going... Okay,
yeah, so let's look back on this. So what do you mean when you say having your emotions run you?
So you almost kind of feel like you can't control yourself. Like, it's almost like you feel like almost like that your higher mind is no longer on board.
Yeah. Because so I'm just feeling really cranky, and I'm just really cranky bitch to everyone that's around me, and I'm nasty to my kids, and I'm short-tempered, so I'm running out of an emotion as opposed to...
You haven't brought any presence to it. You're kind of running on autopilot. Your unconsciousness is doing its thing. Because what's also happening, you know, as humans, is that it's a constant battle between our lower mind and our higher mind. So what makes us different from animals is that we have a high governance. So we have a higher mind that steps in and sort of tells us, no, that's not your value system. No, that's, you know, probably not wise, blah, blah, blah. But we have a lower mind that seeks pleasure, right? So our lower mind is seeking instant gratification, pleasure without pain, which you can't have a pleasure without a pain. You know, it's kind of the seeking that kind of the lustful desire, you know, the food with no repercussions. And that's also when you'll find that when you're making those choices, and this is, you know, don't judge them too much, because then you don't want to beat yourself up, which is then going to create more challenges. But observing yourself in that and going, is this running me right now? Or am I kind of having a little bit more governance over what's happening to me? Because our unconscious is really, really powerful. And we'll find ourselves doing things often when we're swept up in emotion that we wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, yeah.
Because...
like, even part of that could be emotional eating.
Yeah, and that's a massive one. I mean, pretty much everyone emotionally eats in some way, because we're almost pre-programmed to do it as children, you know, when you look at food as reward and,
I know,
you know, that instant feeling of something, you know.
But even sweetness itself is a numbing tool. Like, the actual taste of sweetness is an emotional number.
Yeah. And I think the thing too is that because things are always changing form, you might have kind of an epiphany and heal one thing, but that then makes way for kind of filling that up with something else. Like, I was commenting to my mentor around this work that, like, I kind of had this massive shift, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then I ended up eating a whole bunch of chocolate, and he's like, yeah, that's just your drug of choice at the moment. You know, so it's not to judge it either, because as humans, we're going to always have those things that we do that, you know, you kind of heal one thing and it just makes way for something else. And that's okay, you know, but it's what you're thinking and feeling in that moment. around what you're doing, that you're not kind of subordinating to somebody else's view of that being bad, or, you know, because...
Or that you're doing it unconsciously. Like, what you're saying is, I just all of a sudden realised I ate all this chocolate. But the point is, you had that moment of realisation and then stepped in the higher mind to kind of break apart why it was there.
Yeah. But, I mean, also the thing is, because, you know, we'll have to talk about this in another podcast. I've really kind of come full circle on that whole concept of conscious parenting, because what some of these one-sided beliefs do is make us beat ourselves up when we're not that, when in fact to be one thing all the time is impossible. And so what you end up doing is setting up a fantasy, which you're ultimately then going to create a nightmare to make you see that your fantasy was unrealistic. So your fantasy is always being present with your children, conscious, perfect mother, you know, does all this stuff. And so it's unrealistic. You cannot do that all the time. To be human is to be both. And to process things at a deeper level, we often have to be unconsciously doing other things to allow that stuff to sit deeper. So it serves us to also be not present with our children. It serves us to be unconscious sometimes and to not judge that, you know, but just to be mindful of it and to see it.
I just love that, because that's been both of our journeys in various forms, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And, you know, like even that story, you know, which we'll touch on maybe in the food one, where that mother, you know, who was probably me, completely organic and, you know, no artificial anything for her kids, and she gets to the birthday party that's full of the table of absolute party rubbish food, and her kids, she notices, who are, you know, I don't know, primary school age, are having an argument between themselves about which one's organic and which one is rubbish food and which one isn't, and then she all of a sudden has that moment where she looks at the other kids and they're all happy. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
I kind of, you know, got to primary school having had this hugely conscious parenting path of preschool, and got to primary school and I saw all these la-di-da, fantastic, having a great time being a mother, and I was sitting there going, what?
Yeah.
Have I missed this whole thing because I've been so fucking conscious? Like, seriously.
Fuck that consciousness.
I know. And let me tell you that I got blessed this beautiful group of women in primary school who are mainstream but divine, divine, and have showed me how to embrace and love the unconscious, you know, fuck everything kind of part of me.
Fuck everything, let's have a wine, you know?
Seriously, that creates so much freedom and therefore so much happiness and joy that actually, in the end, proliferates out to my children. Yeah. Rather than me thinking it's the opposite. I just love it.
That is cool. That's very cool. And often we attract those people who are, you know, what we see as anti-us, to get us to kind of get back into centre a bit.
Yeah,
you know,
that's probably what I think happened.
When you get sort of too far down one track, it's just those people who start showing up and questioning you, and, you know, start to get you back on a bit more of a, you know, even plane maybe.
Yeah. If you're willing to see that mirror in that moment too, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Because ultimately the people who piss us off the most offer us the most opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
Which can be hard because we are support-seeking creatures as humans. So, you know, we'll tend to choose to associate with people who are like us, which is lovely and comforting and wonderful, but they're not the ones who are going to help us grow the most. So it's also wise to choose to spend time with people who get under your skin, because they'll push your buttons and they'll get you to own your shit.
So true.
Well, we are just about out of time for this week's podcast.
Yeah.
And I could talk about this stuff for ages, but I won't. But I'd love to hear, you know, what your experiences have been, you know, on your own emotional journeys, and whether, you know, anything that we're talking about here kind of resonates, and what, you know.
Or has more questions around it. Yeah. And you'd like us to explore that further. Because this is massive. In this podcast, you've got universal laws, value systems, emotional runnings, triggers, like there's so many. And
I'm also really conscious that I've got such a steep learning curve on this work that I don't profess to be an expert by any stretch, so that this is very much going to be an evolving theme that's going to pepper, I think, a lot of our podcasts, as kind of my knowledge grows and my, you know, kind of life experience grows around this work, and we get to hash it out.
Totally.
Online and offline.
Well, what do you really want these beautiful listeners of ours to take into their next week?
I would love everyone to take into the next week a affirmation which I came up with, which was really brought about by my emotional roller coaster that I've been running the last week. And it is, I'm willing to see and own all that I am.
It's incredibly
or in fact,
powerful.
It's really, I guess, that I'm willing and open, because sometimes we we'll see it, but we're not actually open to seeing it. So I am willing and open to seeing and owning all that I am. And affirmations, everyone goes on about, affirmations are a bit woo-woo, but in fact...
Do they, Bridget?
I don't know. Maybe that's just my perception. I probably still got one foot in that mainstream camp pretty solidly. But they're actually really powerful, particularly when you choose ones that are balanced. So sometimes people will choose ones like, Out of the Secret or whatever, which is, I am a rich and powerful person and I say no to negativity. Well, that's ridiculous because that's not balanced. So it's really important when you're choosing an affirmation to work with that is actually a balanced one that accepts your wholeness as a human. Because affirmations are awesome because what they actually do once you say them enough and integrate them enough into your life, that you get a cellular response. You start to actually feel that and live that. And so in my case, I'm wanting to work with that affirmation to start to reveal to myself the things that I've shut myself off from in my life, to call those in so that I can, heal some stuff that I'm sitting with at the moment. So I invite you to use that in your life if that resonates. So if you'd like to connect with us, we are on Facebook at facebook.com/Nourishing the Mother. And we'd love you to rate us on iTunes too if you are enjoying the podcasts. And if you'd like to connect with Julie, she's at naturopathicbirth.com.au. We've already had a few people who've been getting in touch asking about her soul sessions. So
thanks, Bridget.
Definitely, get onto that.
Thanks. Tell me about your next movie because I am obsessed.
Yes. So the next Suburban Sandcastles film night is on the 14th of October, and it's called The Empowerment Project. So it's really following extraordinary women doing amazing things, and it's all around the concept of, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So yeah, really excited about this one.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and get there so that we can have a Nourishing the Mother little stall there. So if you come to that film, please come and say hello. So once again, suburbansandcastles.com. And for the month of October, for that particular movie, which we're loving, Bridget's also offered a special for Nourishing the Mother listeners that if you purchase a ticket to her Suburban Sandcastles October movie, that ticket does then equate to a $50 discount for our November retreat. So our one-day immersive retreat where we're really looking forward to diving deep, peeling back your layers, looking at where the universal laws, emotions, all of the stuff we've talked about today plays out in your life and how you can actually really flip that and start to create the life that you really want to live and the woman that you really want to be.
Can't wait.
Letting the world witness that as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.